What is up, you wonderful people? Nima, and today I want to talk about a game that came out last week called Echo Generation. Now, when I say it came out last week, I also mean just for the Switch. It's been out for PC for a while, but regardless, I recently was able to beat it, and I'm pretty excited to talk about it. While I do think that this game is fun, interesting, silly, kind of unique, I also think there's a few things that are gonna be pretty big negatives for people. Either way, before we get into it, please hit that like and subscribe button, because if you don't, a portal to the Upside Down will open up right behind you. Alright, so Echo Generation is a very interesting game. I definitely love the aesthetics, but I don't know what it's called. I've seen this a lot lately. It's almost like a mosaic meets pixel art. I don't know. Or maybe like a 3D pixelization. Like I said, I have seen this growing trend, more so in like a lot of Japanese games, but I do think it offers this level of detail and clarity to the game that I think is really appreciated, especially for those that probably can't achieve the 2.5 HD 2D that you see in like Octopath Traveler 2. So I think it's a really good option, and it really adds a different life to the game. So aside from graphics, the game also has a really good soundtrack. I can say that it's not reminiscent of the 90s, as this game does take place in the 90s, but what they have done here I think is really good. Plus I think it would be really hard for them to have a 90s soundtrack on a smaller budget. You know, pretty expensive to add like Nirvana and Metallica into your music budget. But again, I do really like what they've done here with that. Now, the whole story is sort of an interesting combination, as it seems to combine X-Files, Stranger Things, Goosebumps, and then sprinkle on some like Paper Mario just for fun. As this game starts, you're able to create your own character. Now, you're very limited in what options you have for customization. Needless to say, you cannot have a green-haired mohawk dude, but honestly, I don't blame them, especially with the art style that they're using. I think it might be difficult to add too much customization to it, but you are able to name the character, and you're given these like really small tasks as you start, because essentially you want to go out and play, but you need to bring your sister. You do have a bigger goal in mind, and that is to meet up with some of your friends, because you are planning on shooting a film, an alien, sci-fi, horror, B-budget type film, and so you need to get with them and decide who's going to do what, as well as maybe enlist some of the locals to help you out with certain things to make your film look really good, or at least as authentic as you can possibly do it on this tiny budget. But before even starting that, you have to convince your sister to come out and hang with you, because if you don't get her to come with you, then you can't go out. These are your mom's rules, so you have to figure out how to appease her. And this is where the name of the game really starts, and that is, what can you do for me? You see, that's the question that you pretty much have to answer throughout this entire game. No matter what it is, you have to do something for someone else. It can be a trade-off. It could also be favoring you, but usually it's favoring the person. As you can ask your sister, hey, can you hang out? No, not unless you get me a really hard to find street cone. Or, hey, can you lend me a screwdriver? No, not unless you get me some really hard to find electrical cord. And this bartering mechanic is the engine to this entire game. It's the one thing that pushes the game forward, and pretty much the only thing. Well, that and bosses, of course, but aside from those two things, nothing else propels the game forward, and this can get kind of annoying after a while. You just feel like you're constantly trying to find something that could be completely out of the way. But regardless, it's not that big of a deal, especially when the game itself is so much fun. The story is basically that of you trying to shoot your film, but at the same time also try to solve different cases. So everyone in town has something that they want to tell you, a mystery to solve. There always seems to be something that you stumble on that in some way gets you involved with aliens, monsters, even the undead. There's nothing that you won't fight in this game, and that itself is pretty cool. It's why I feel like it is a combination of all of these different things, almost like Goosebumps or X-Files, where you're running into different paranormal, supernatural creatures. Although while this game could go very serious, dark, dramatic, whatever, it doesn't. It actually stays rather lighthearted and is actually pretty funny. In fact, most of the dialogue is enjoyable just because of some of the humor that's in it. Not to mention, the way that a lot of the characters talk back and forth to each other is somewhat lifelike. I will say a little bit of the dialogue is robotic, but to some degree that's what you expect in a fetch quest type game, where a lot of times when you're talking to other characters, it's all involving what they can get you or you can get them, And when you do have those real solid conversations, a real dialogue of discussing what's going on, the characters do seem to have some depth to them. They seem to have a little bit of uniqueness to them, if you will, as where it's easy to write a lot of these characters as just flat, as just kind of a unimportant NPC, but that's where this game has so much heart, and I think that's where the charm is, and why I do enjoy this game, because of that dialogue, because of how much they've rounded a lot of the characters in the game. Now, is it super deep? Is it like just insane? No, of course not. Like I said, it's lighthearted. It's silly. It is reminiscent of the interactions that you might see in like Goonies or something of that nature. But one of the places that I think that could hurt this game is the combat, because it is turn-based combat. It is very much in line with that Paper Mario style, where to do certain moves, you are required to do a little mini game. Some of these can be really difficult, like stopping a moving arrow at the right spot to align with the imprint of an arrow. It might sound confusing, it's not, but it's hard to do. Or one of the most difficult I found was lining up a reticle with the actual like scope vision kind of thing. It's like a circle basically, and you have to line the plus in with that circle. That was really hard. I almost never got that right. And one of the big issues in that is the fact that the penalty for not doing that correctly is pretty steep. Usually most of these skills can hit pretty hard. Automatically, if you can't do it right, you lose half of your damage ability, and you usually lose whatever debuff ability was attached to that skill. For instance, if it was bleeding and it could max out at 14 and you mess up that little mini game, then it's going to hit for 7 with no bleeding effect. On that same side though, some of just the very basic moves can end up doing quite a bit of damage, especially if you leveled up your strength. Another thing, the characters are able to level up. You can level up their health, their strength, or their skills. And I noticed that the main character had the hardest skills to seem to hit in those mini games, so what I ended up doing was just leveling up his strength and his HP. Meanwhile, his sister, who becomes a pretty important team member, I end up using her skills a lot more, and some of those could do some major damage, especially if you focused more on her skills. But I can't help but think like this pretty much just kills the whole skill option for the main character. Now everyone else in the game, their skills are actually pretty helpful and you use them quite a bit. Your pet cat actually becomes part of your team, and he's probably the only one that can heal. I believe there's one other person, but it's not as significant as your cat. And again, your character, your main character, just becomes very one-dimensional. At the same time, the damage output from just his basic attack to one of his skills isn't that significant, so it's almost just better to just use that base attack. But that's not the only issue with combat in this game. The other issue would be the bosses. For the most part, they have the same mechanics, just beat the hell out of them. The only difference is with each boss, they get around 50 HP more, and they seem to be more intimidating, but for the most part, they're pretty easy. I was never stuck on a boss. I was only ever stuck on where to find something that I needed for someone else. But this also leads me to my last concern for the game, and that is value. So I finished the game at about 7.5 to 8 hours, and yet this game is $24.99. It is on discount right now for I think $22.99. It's 10% off until the 3rd of July. But even that, I think it's a little pricey for it. I would like to see it around that $14.99 range. Honestly, I just think it's a fair price. For one, the game is like 3 years old. It's been out on PC for a minute. Not to mention, it doesn't have much replayability at all. In fact, once you beat the game, you're pretty much content letting the story end there. There's not much left to go back to, and it has a pretty steep price point for only about a 6 to 10 hour game. But that's my thoughts on it. I would say overall, I would rate this game at about a 7 out of 10. I think it's a really fun experience. I think it's really cool. I would advise people to put it on a wish list and wait for a sale, but the $24.99 is a bit pricey for it. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are. Have you played this game? Have you thought about this game? Have you seen it on the eShop? Anything and everything down in the comment section below is much appreciated. I love each and every one of you guys. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.